Network with LoRaWAN Wireless Access Network. Perhaps allow me a few minutes to talk about the WCA itself. So we were founded in 1994. The Wireless Communication Alliance is a non-profit business league dedicated to collaboration in the wireless industry. It started with Silicon Valley in 1994, but thanks to Zoom and also thanks to pandemic, unfortunately or fortunately, we do this worldwide right now. We reach people in Singapore, China, Japan, of course, Europe also, and West Coast, East Coast, everywhere. We are reachable and accessible. Our mission is basically to networking people, very easy. Thanks to our sponsors, which makes this live streaming and this event possible, like Google, Aspel, CIG, but also Vola and SensorWalk. Andy, thank you so much to be also our sponsor, ETI, Woodside Capital, Energist, and many, many others. Upcoming events. So we have our next upcoming event is on November 18th, 2021, which is our 22nd annual event, What's Hot, What's Not, where people from VC and M&A speak about what was great in 2021, what not so good, and what 2022 will bring. Followed by a startup pitch event in December 16, where also VC and investors interview a startup company. In this year, we will have European startup companies. The year 2022 will start in January with our annual Spectrum 5G event, followed in February with our annual 6G, Spectrum 69 gigahertz and above event. And in March, we will have a wireless power and energy harvesting event, and many, many more. So follow us on our website. You see lots of IoT events, a lot of energy harvesting events, everything from the above. Right? So a little bit housekeeping. Please use the Zoom question and answer section for question. We will monitor it and ask you, or just raise your virtual hand, what you have on your panel. Presentation recordings will be available within 48 hours. Hopefully we can make this, but normally it is 48 hours. Again, greetings to the world and thanks for being our guest. Last but not least, if you want to speak or sponsor, please contact us at sponsor@WCA. Raffle, as always, we have a raffle. This time we have a Helium tracker based on LoRa, a GPS asset tracker sponsored by SensorWorks. And thank you, Andy, for doing this. So this raffle will take place in about 50 minutes from now. It depends how active our panel will be. I will switch on again, or Andy is doing this, and we will have a raffle drawing. You must be present to be the winner. With this, no further ado, I will introduce and hand over to Andy. Andy is president of SensorWorks. Yeah, Andy, the show is all yours.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate your leadership here at WCA and bringing these leading edge technologies to the community. So with that, I'll go ahead and do my presentation and introduce the panel as well. So let me do that. Let's see. Okay. And let me know if you guys can see my screen. All right, wonderful. Well, welcome all. Appreciate everyone from around the world and on live stream, on LinkedIn, as well as Zoom. This is an exciting topic that I've been nudging the WCA to talk about because it is a movement. It's more than just a technology, and I do believe it needs to be addressed. And what I have today for you all is a panel of experts who are really influencers in this movement called Decentralized Wireless, or DeWi as it's known. We have folks from the ecosystem of the chipset, from Semtech, who really is the crux of the technology, to builders of miners, to distributors of miners, to the alliance that handles the decentralized wireless quality and onboarding. So with that, let me go and start and introduce the panel here. So our decentralized wireless panel, here are their pictures, and hopefully you can see them on video as well. So everyone say hi to the folks out there. And what we're going to do today, just some housekeeping rules. Number one, please ask your questions in the chat, and we will address them during Q&A. Number two, we're going to make this a very wireless-centric talk. So no asking, where's my miner question. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the technology that got us here. We're going to talk about the insatiable appetite for getting these miners deployed, and how they're deployed, and why they're deployed, and what is this movement that we're talking about. So with that, let me start to introduce our first speaker. Or actually, before I do that, I did want to have a graphic that I put together today. I thought was kind of cool. So just for kicks, I went ahead and took a snapshot of the Helium Network. And what we're going to describe here is, for those who don't know, what is the Helium Network? It's basically a company that has decided to build a LoRaWAN, at least originally a LoRaWAN network built by the people. And in essence, you can place this miner box in your place of business or your home, and you contribute to that network. And in exchange for that, you will then get, you will be mining this H&T coin, that is a cryptocurrency that is owned by Helium. And the snapshot that I took, just to kind of show you the growth rate, is here's a snapshot that I took on August 8th from archive.org that shows the total hotspots in August was about 11,000 hotspots, and the market price for the H&T cryptocurrency was $1.41. As of today, it's now $48 for the crypto H&T currency, and then we're now sitting at 306,000 hotspots. And I'm sure TJ will tell you more about the growth that he's seeing, being one of the distributors of the miners. So just we're gonna do a deep dive into different aspects of the Helium movement and the tokenomics that's really driven this growth around the world. So with that, again, my name is Andy Doe from Embedded Works. I'm the founder of Embedded Works, as well as other brands for IoT, including Tracking for Less and SensorWorks. And in my spare time, I also am a board member of the WCA, and very happy to be hosting this IoT Applications event. So getting to the panel, which you want to hear most rather than me, let's jump to it, and let's introduce Patrick Bernowski from Semtech. So Patrick, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what is Semtech all about, for those who don't know?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Patrick Bernowski. I've been with Semtech for about 5 years now. My background is really semiconductors or high-speed communications semiconductors. Semtech is a company that was founded in the 1960s. They started out with high reliability products, mainly for the military space. Of course, since then, we have long moved on from just doing military components. Today, we focus on 3 different types of products. First one is the protection diode business. So imagine anything that you touch, like a phone, a tablet, a laptop, that has anti-static protection built in, probably will use our diodes in that. The second business unit is our signal integrity products business that develops and manufactures components that go into a variety of optical modules. And then the third one, which of course is dearest to my heart, which is our wireless business unit. And that's where the LoRa products come from that are used in all of the Helium gateways.
Thank you, Patrick. So since today's topic, we're talking about DeWi, Decentralized Wireless. How has the creation of DeWi and HIP-19 affected Semtech's business?
Well, obviously, given the explosion of the Helium network, that has greatly increased the demand for our gateway chipsets. So each and every one of these gateways contains a 3-chip chipset from Semtech, and our demand has, probably, I can't give you exact numbers, but our demand has probably gone up tenfold compared to a year ago. So that's, quite a nice ride.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask this of each of our panel speakers, but when you first heard of the Helium business model, what was your first impression?
Well, I got into it. Let's maybe take a little bit, few steps back. So I got introduced to Helium back in, I think, 2017. At the time, they had no plans for it, this decentralized wireless network yet. And they've been kicking the tires on a variety of IoT technologies, on different RF modulation schemes, with of course, focusing on IoT solutions, looking at different verticals. Then at some point in 2018, I believe it was, they created their white paper that laid down the premise for this decentralized wireless network using IoT. At the time, they called their protocol LongFi. But of course, now fast forward to today, of course, we all know that they picked LoRaWAN or LoRa as their protocol and RF technology to make this network happen.
Do you have any history on why LoRaWAN technology was picked amongst others? Did they consider?
I think predominantly because of the tremendous range you get with LoRa, right? As part of this decentralized network, they came up with this really clever scheme of having the gateways witness each other. So normal, when I say normal, non-Helium LoRaWAN gateways, they don't talk to each other. But what they implemented was a beaconing scheme where a gateway will send out a ping, and then other gateways need to witness that ping. And the more gateways that witness your beacon, the more rewards you get, up to a certain, extent, of course.
Right. Yeah, it certainly has gotten the interest of those folks who are on the sidelines about getting into crypto and mining. So I do see folks that I would think never would be into something like this, and now they all of a sudden want to get into this movement. So what's the makeup of the HIP-19 applicants, and what challenges are they facing, Patrick?
So the HIP-19 really is all about anybody that wants to build a Helium gateway. They can submit an application that then needs to be approved by the Manufacturing Oversight Committee as part of the nonprofit part of Helium, the Decentralized Wireless Alliance. Of course, if you look across the makeup of these applicants, and I think we've well exceeded 60 now at this point. You can basically put them in 3 different buckets. There are your OEMs or ODMs that are already building or were already building LoRaWAN gateways. And no surprise, if you look at the, currently, if you look at the connected Helium gateways today on the blockchain, the 2/3 come from only 2 vendors that already were familiar or used to building Helium LoRaWAN gateways. So that's the first bucket. That's the existing gateway manufacturers. The second bucket is companies that might be in IoT, but they haven't necessarily built LoRa products. Then the third bucket is startups that have never built anything. So it's probably about an even mix, I would say, a third.
Right. That's. I think it's kind of good that Semtech it has a model where it allows the established company that's been doing manufacturing for decades to the startup to really play in this space, and I think that's really going to help. Improve the quality of the miners and the technology, right? Yes. So that's wonderful.
Absolutely.
And then for Semtech's interest in the Helium network, is there an interest in besides the gateway chipsets? Like what is other interests for Semtech?
Yes, of course. The bigger interest is getting sensors connected, because selfishly, we sell chips that go in gateways, but we also sell chips that go into sensors. And you can have a ratio of 1,000 or 10,000 if you wanted to sensors to gateway.
Yeah.
Right? So you can imagine if you have 1 million gateways, you could have 1 billion sensors.
Yes.
Easy. So and that's what we strive towards, right? We'd like to see an acceleration in the growth of the usage of the network. To us, the network is of course great because Helium, this has really been a unique model where they got people to spend their own money to buy infrastructure to build the Helium network. And in return, they created this cryptocurrency or this utility token to reward the people to build the network.
Yeah, what's the old famous saying, greed is good? So I think that, this is kind of hit a nerve with people and getting into partake in the mining. And again, Semtech is at the foundation of this because of the technology. So that's wonderful. I'm going to ask you a little bit later, and just keep in the back of your mind some wacky LoRaWAN implementations that you have seen. So sure. I'll come back to you on that.
I'll think about that.
So with that, let's go to our next speaker, Scott Siegel. Scott, so when I heard about the Decentralized Wireless Alliance, and I said to myself, is this a Wi-Fi alliance kind of deal? Like what is the function of DeWi? And if you can please introduce yourself and your organization too.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, Andy, thanks for putting everything together and moderating today. So Scott Siegel, I oversee operations for the Decentralized Wireless Alliance, which is the de facto nonprofit foundation arm kind of servicing the Helium network. And the function behind DeWi is really that we are providing a governing framework, both for the blockchain as well as our foundation membership. But blockchains in general, the idea that this is decentralized technology governed by a population of token holders and network participants, we actually think about putting that together in a way that allows the entire network, the community to scale. So thinking about the governing framework, helping to shepherd the community through, there is so for those that are familiar, there's HIPs or Helium improvement proposals. And these are all ways that the community actually participates in actually thinking about how do you want to evolve the technology, the economics, anything related to the overall Helium network. And we spearhead that, started with monthly community calls, having an open repository on GitHub to actually discuss and implement these changes. And we're continuing to advance that in ways that are more scalable. I won't get into all the details of how we think about on-chain voting, which is a way to be a little bit more transparent, a little bit more inclusive, but the governing framework is a very important part of our work. On top of that, we also do run a grants program. So again, thinking about open source or public use contributions. So that's improvement to the underlying protocol, anything that adds utility to the network, whether that is interacting with other blockchains, prototyping and building out new types of hardware, thinking about use cases that we can help to bootstrap and get off the ground that have a publicly available design component with that. Thinking about the data analytics, and again, the idea that in the same way that you'd have a large central organization that is a little bit more siloed within this ecosystem, we need to make sure we have the appropriate tools. So it's not just at the infrastructure level, but what are the things that people need as far as the data analysis to actually see what's happening in the network, ensuring that performance is scalable, secure, actually maintaining that so it is verifiable, high integrity network that whether that's consumer users or enterprise users can reasonably rely on. So as we continue to scale up the foundation, a lot of this work is actually kind of maintaining that. Granted, any type of blockchain development, you want to make sure you are effectively distributed. You want to have multiple points of view, and you want to make sure that those contributions are coming from a diverse population. But at least in the early days, to kind of bootstrap that community and shepherd the technology and the economics forward, that's a big part of what we're doing. So the grants program helps to those contributions and also kind of like broaden our developer ecosystem. Beyond that, education advocacy, obviously a big part of our work, and that will continue to scale up into next year as we're actually making a lot of hires right now. So educating people about the nature of what are decentralized networks, why is this better, how can you participate, what types of improvements and ways can you contribute, For businesses that may, there's betterment for commercial industrial organizations, how can we educate them on where there are benefits to them from an economic perspective? So really, kind of those are really the three pillars of the foundation. My background, actually, so I'm less of a wireless person. This is actually the fourth blockchain project I've worked on. So coming, from a, more of the crypto and blockchain technology, working on things that are the decentralized finance world, and a number of different protocols that similar as far as where you have distributed governance in a large community contributing and kind of seeing the economic benefit of how you can participate at the infrastructure level. But as we start to look ahead, another number of the things that the foundation is taking on, in addition to just maintaining the blockchain, is thinking about, and we've already started to do this with establishing new committees specifically focused on LoRaWAN, is as we think about local frequencies, how do we make these decisions? Since it's not a singular corporation, how do we make sure that the community can decide, what are the right types of frequencies for roaming? Are we going to support multiple frequencies, multiple regions? All of this is a very distributed effort, which means you have to have somebody kind of spearheading that discussion. So it's not that we are making the decisions and we're not a central point of authority, but at least trying to provide a framework for how those decisions are being made. Are they being made fairly? Is there an open framework for that participation? So that's a lot of what we're doing. The foundation's still relatively young. We actually stood up as an organization just last year, and I joined the team in January of this year, and it's been absolutely fantastic. I think of all the blockchain projects I've worked on, Helium was the one that was always most exciting to me, even before I even joined the team. It had such incredible real-world utility. It's just really fantastic to see the progress that's been made in such a short period of time.
Yeah. Yes, Scott, just someone had pointed out that when I was putting this slide together, I misspelled your name. So my apologies. I will get that corrected on the chat here. So it's Scott Siegel, S-I-G-E-L.
It's two T's and S-I-G-E-L.
Right, I know. So a double whammy on that one.
not a problem. I would say that was my fault for not getting you everything ahead of time. So
no, it's okay.
Not a problem.
Yeah. So when you have this alliance, are we looking at down the road where more hardware will have kind of like an insignia or logo, the way that the Wi-Fi alliance is? It's got to be blessed and approved, and through some sort of vetting process. Is that the plan for DeWi?
Yeah. So in terms of thinking about again, like a lot of what the foundation is doing, as far as the way that we think about establishing standards, is that the same that Patrick sits on a manufacturing oversight committee, and a lot of these other committees that will be stood up around vetting out different types of hardware. Is that how do we make sure that the brand is used appropriately, and what are those types of standards that allow a committee to approve and onboard those types of manufacturers? And this is where the nature of permissionless networks, we're still learning as we go on some of these things, where as far as, does certain hardware work? Is it certified where it needs to be per geography?
Yeah.
Is it able to talk to the blockchain? Kind of passing those very basic requirements has been outlined in some of the proposals from the community. Once it kind of checks that box and it's been approved, we want to make sure that we are being mindful of allowing people to have use of, whether that's the DeWi brand, and again, even looking forward of where the Helium brand can be a little bit more open and public use. We're still in the process of defining what that's going to look like, but the idea that passing some certain basic testing and framework will allow that to be more distributed out to the public, because it's an open public blockchain. That means that if anybody can use it and anybody can be building on top of it, there should be some use of that brand and those trademarks. But we're trying to be mindful of that, because at the same time, there's reputational risk component. So if somebody comes in and just starts building hardware that's if it's unethical use of the network, or unfairly generating rewards, we want to make sure that, again, like, it's not the foundation's place to police on those things, but it's a matter of how do we make sure the community is informed of what we believe to be a reasonable use of that trademark or not. So it's still, I'd say it's still work in progress, but decentralized networks are still a relatively new thing for lots of different use cases.
Well, before all of this, I knew what DeFi was, and I didn't know what DeWi was until I met you and understood about this Helium thing. So thank you for that We're going to move on to our next speaker, Barney Bernowski of Tectelli. And let me advance the slide here. So Barney, welcome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the short notice for filling in. And I've known you for a little bit, and your company has been known to be a leader in the LoRaWAN gateway. So can you please do an introduction about yourself and your company?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for inviting me again, Andy. And thank you for spelling my name correctly. But joking aside, yeah, I head up business development activities at Tectelli. Tectelli, for those of you who don't know, we are a manufacturer of LoRa equipment, specifically with a particular focus on gateways, in particular gateways that are really designed for the outdoor environment, thereby what we call carrier grade gateways, right? So focusing on optimization of the available ISM spectrum that we have in North America and across the different global bands, and in particular focusing on the environmental ruggedness of the gateways themselves, right? So our gateways typically are, deployed by the guys who deploy networks for a living, right? The guys who basically roll out networks as a service. And in addition to that, the gateways that we're making, we have a full catalog of end devices that we've also invested in and have been building over the last few years. So yeah, we've been doing LoRa for quite some time, and it's been, already getting good. And, it's hard to obviously, not to get enthusiastic about kind of the additional accelerator that Helium has created for the entire ecosystem of the LoRa folks.
Yeah, I mean, your company's obviously a LoRaWAN or LoRa fan, and I looked up. Yeah, well, I looked up your company. I mean, you guys are ex-Nortel base station guys. So, what was the premise, or to make your company a LoRaWAN, kind of exclusive?
Powerhouse.
Yes.
Yeah, those were the words you were looking for.
Yeah, exactly.
No, so we certainly So we're ex-Nortel. We've come from a very sort of cellular centric world, very hierarchical world, right? Not a decentralized network for sure. But really, when we first looked at getting into LPWANs, low power wide area networks, we looked at a number of different technologies, right? We looked at Sigfox, we looked at LPWAN, Ingenu, with the intent of capitalizing on some of the emerging trends that we were seeing, back in 14, 15 with respect to IoT. LoRa, because what was basically kind of what sold us on the LoRa technology, aside from, all the qualities of the air signal itself, was the fact that it was essentially an open architecture. And for us, for manufacturers of guys who build infrastructure, i.e. radios, namely the gateways, that was very important. We didn't want to just build end devices. We didn't want to be kind of relegated like you are largely in the 3GPP or the cellular ecosystem. If you're a smallish company, all you can really focus on is building on the CPE equipment, the end devices. You can't really, you can try, but it's hard to compete with guys like Ericsson, Nokia, the guys who are building base stations for the guys like Verizon and AT&T. So LoRa and the LoRa Alliance in particular kind of opened that field up for companies like ours, where we could step into the fray and basically build a gateway, right? From an infrastructure perspective. A company like ours could build a network server. We can build end devices. So in essence, we could build a complete full stack IoT solution. And this is essentially what appealed to us in order to invest in LoRa.
I can imagine the cost of carrier certifications and things, is another thing that you don't have to worry about, right? And so you're building good radio. Well, I know you have cellular, as part of your portfolio, but that's interesting. So as the longtime maker of LoRaWAN gateways, was it an easy decision to, start making helium miners, and all of a sudden, hey, let's do this because everybody else is doing it, or what gravitated you and to do that?
We were. So, I hate to say it, we didn't jump on it. I was just looking at my notes. I first learned of Helium was when Ned Taylor reached out to me via an introduction from Patrick. So thanks, Patrick. And this was literally almost 2 years to the day. It was November 5th when he sent me the first introductory canned email saying, hey, Barney, we're doing this Helium network. We have this LongFi technology. And by the way, we almost sold 2,000 gateways. Right? So that was 2 years ago. We initially didn't see the connection, right? Because they weren't doing LoRa. They were doing kind of this proprietary long PHY technology. And then kind of as the conversation proceeded, they switched over to LoRa, so that became much more interesting. And then kind of as the, I would say their momentum started growing, what started happening was our LoRa customers were basically saying, hey, we need some LoRa gateways. Oh, and by the way, can those gateways do some Helium stuff, right? So in a way, we've kind of, just to remain, relevant, whether or not our customers are interested in they all are, but if they were interested in Helium mining or not, they're all asking the same question. If I'm going to invest in LoRa, can I benefit from this whole Helium movement, right? So we're doing it. So
yeah. So if the customer asks, you will deliver. And you're right. I mean, that's what we're seeing is if we're going to deploy a network anyway, we might as well have something that to mine and maybe have some revenue generating aspect to it.
Exactly. And I mean, the kind of customers we're dealing with aren't customers, we don't deal with consumer level folks, right? Typically, most of our customers are, institutional enterprise level customers, carriers, folks who put up managed networks, right? They're familiar with this whole, I'm going to put out gateways with an SLA kind of stuff. And those are the guys that are asking about Helium, right? So that kind of changes the game.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I've noticed is that not only do you have a lot of gateways, but you guys are releasing an overwhelming number of sensors as well, LoRaWAN sensors. So can you share some LoRaWAN applications that have surprised you? So it's kind of an early question, but what have you seen with the sensors that you guys are producing?
Certainly. I would categorize the devices we make kind of into 4 broad categories, right? So the first category being smart buildings. I think that's pretty straightforward and familiar to everyone. So you're dealing with things like presence, occupancy, air quality monitoring, things like that. These were, I would say, done amicably by, let's call them technologies like Z-Wave, Zigbee, but LoRa, is now really being advocated for those kinds of solutions. Tracking, we've seen a surprising amount of tracking, specifically in the indoor tracking space, right? So LoRa plus, augmenting technologies like Bluetooth provide a very unique solution for being able to track people and things inside, right? And then if you combine all 3, GPS, Bluetooth, and LoRa, now you're really cooking with respect to the flexibility with which you can create a multitude of different enterprise level tracking solutions. Obviously, we've done some ag and industrial stuff, but the one that is most interesting to us now, and the kind of one that we're sort of investing in quite heavily in, is really the application of LoRa in the medical space, right? So when the pandemic started in 2020, we started looking at this space with the eye towards how do we monitor people that are potentially in quarantine, or people who cannot be reached, or people in old folks' home, right? If you'll recall some of the terrible things that were happening in these elder care facilities. So we came up with some very simple wearables that are powered by LoRa, and by virtue of the fact that LoRa is extremely battery efficient, has extremely good long range, you can basically outfit folks with these wearables. They don't have to recharge them, they don't have to sync them with any sort of kind of devices. You just monitor all of that stuff because it's basically being, put over LoRa at a centralized location, and you have access to people's vital statistics. So, it kind of falls into the category of IoT for good, right?
Right. I like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
You can steal that. Anyways, I think I stole it, but anyways, it doesn't matter.
Trademark it here. You've heard it here.
Yeah, so that's kind of really where we're seeing the trends, and in the broad strokes, right? Kind of people ask me, what's the killer IoT app, right? There really isn't one. And the beauty of the Helium network as it's accelerating this adoption of the LoRa technology is the fact that you don't need to have this single monolithic massive use case in order to justify your investment, right? Because the infrastructure is popping up all over the place. So if you want to create a little device that tracks, pelicans, and this is a real use case, by the way, in the Green Bay area, up in Wisconsin, you can make a go of it, right? You don't need to sell a million things. I mean, maybe Semtech does, but you don't need to sell a million things as a device manufacturer in order to have a good business, centered around this technology. And we're seeing that kind of cookie cutter model kind of cropping up all over the place.
And those are interesting applications. So do you think that with going back to the code decentralized wireless, which is writing on the Helium LNS or network, do you see that that would be feasible for a critical business like healthcare and things, or do you feel that's more non-critical?
Yeah. I'm super glad you asked me that.
Yeah.
That's so first and foremost, there is quantity has a quality of its own, right? So the network, if you look across the board and if you look at all the access points that are cropping up, it's almost self-healing, right? So in other words, if your neighbor's access point goes down because he's got crappy Wi-Fi backhaul or whatever, if you have enough of these access points, there is going to be enough coverage. So that's one, right? And I would say that's kind of a more in the this truly distributed sense. But if you'll recall what I said earlier, the guys that are talking to us aren't interested in that model. They're still rolling out centralized networks, but they're rolling it out on the managed basis, right? So they're rolling out managed networks that are Helium enabled, right? And those networks do have a SLA associated with them. And I think overall, the combination of those two is really going to give folks, a very solid, I would say, underpinning for connectivity, right? Because A, you're going to have a lot of access points, right? So quantity has a quality of its own. And B, a lot of those, let's call it more, the wide area networks, right? Based on gateways that we're building, is really going to provide a lot more confidence from a, SLA perspective.
Yeah. No, I like what you said there. That's kind of similar to the carriers, right? No carrier has complete coverage, and exactly. And even the mom and pop carriers, they tend to roam on each other. So that's how some of these larger carriers can have this massive map. In reality, it's kind of cut up with a roaming agreement. So thank you, Barney. That was very educational, and from your point of view, coming to gateways and now selling miners. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce, we see here TJ, and I will get next slide here. So TJ Rancor of CalChip Connect. I've known TJ for a bit, right, TJ? And I think your name is synonymous with miners. You've probably sold more than anybody on the planet. And I'd love to get the audience here an introduction to yourself and your company, and maybe explain the difference between CalChip and CalChip Connect.
Yeah, absolutely. And Andy, thank you to you and the WCA for hosting this, and special thank you, of course, to all of our partners and customers making this movement possible, because it's really exciting what's going on here with the Helium movement. And I look forward to getting into that in a little bit. I'm TJ Rancor. I'm the president and co-founder here at CalChip Connect. My background actually separate from Scott. I was focused all on LoRaWAN and IoT, and focusing on enterprise level deployments in the IoT space. I didn't learn about Helium, and I really didn't get into blockchain until I got introduced by Patrick to Helium back in March of 2020. So I quickly got really excited because I realized that the opportunity that this network could provide to people, right? And by providing more opportunity to people, we allow ourselves as a world to transform and innovate. So that was a really exciting concept to me. And I was living and breathing Helium and trying to read everything I could on blockchain for a few months after that, and continue to be fascinated by it. So we were built, CalChip Connect was built namely because in my course of working with partners, companies, and enterprises in the IoT space, there was always that missing glue that could help connect everything that needs to come together in a solution and around that customer experience to drive success. So, when you look to deploy an IoT solution, it involves sensors, gateways, which are hardware components, but it also involves software, application, and cloud-based components. But beyond just the technology, it also involves supply chain, it involves procurement, and it involves the customer experience. And how do you position that to the market to drive excitement and opportunity. So I landed, I got introduced to the CalChip Electronics folks. So CalChip Electronics Incorporated has been in business since a little after 1985. And what they do is they distribute electronics components. So these are the little components that go in phones and our computers, resistors, capacitors. And they've been distributing those now for 25 plus years. And they've got a great infrastructure here in North America and in Europe, warehousing, and they have a great foundational supply chain and finance and support team. So all those necessary infrastructure kind of skill sets and supply chain experience that you need to help drive opportunity. So when I met them and we put our minds together on, I knew there was a missing gap in this kind of glue that could bring together manufacturers and software companies and try to deliver an experience to consumers and businesses. And so when I found CalChip Electronics, we kind of hit it off right out of the gate. The owners of CalChip were very interested in IoT, the term IoT, and knew that it was going to be a growing sector and believed in it. So we found each other about 1.5 years ago. We were actually formed under CalChip Electronics initially, and we have since spun out as our own entity. And we've grown from 2 full-time staff to 52 in about 11 months here. And, a big portion of that is due to the Helium ecosystem and our place in helping to drive opportunity there.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story, TJ. Yeah, I remember you telling me about that, and you're definitely an entrepreneur's entrepreneur, seeing the trends. So good job there. So what do you think is driving the feverish interest in miners among the Helium community? Is it because it's the easiest way to mine? You don't need too many skills to basically open a box and plug it in, versus doing Bitcoin mining. You actually need some skills, right? So what do you think that's attributed to?
Yeah, so initially, I think when you look at a lot of the initial movement of the Helium miner ecosystem, it was primarily a group of blockchain enthusiasts, historical cryptocurrency enthusiasts, Bitcoin guys, and Ethereum folks that were kind of jumping on this bandwagon and ultimately creating this infrastructure in IoT, this intersection of blockchain and IoT, and allowing us all to build upon that and bring in different technologies and solutions on top of it. So what we've seen transform over the last 12 to 16 months is people are starting to understand and starting to realize, wow, like it's not just about plugging this in anymore. I can connect devices, and I keep bringing up opportunity because this is like so important. People that never used to have opportunity, that were tinkers and came up with good ideas, now they've got opportunity. They've got incentivization techniques through this cryptocurrency and blockchain, and it allows them to build companies and build and drive new ideas. And it's really fascinating now because 12 months ago, I would have said a lot of the folks interested in miners are these cryptocurrency enthusiasts, but now we're getting all of these historical, IoT enthusiasts, plus blockchain enthusiasts, plus we're getting like these innovators coming in and like doing this really cool things with the network.
Wireless enthusiasts. Why some folks are here? Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, no, it does a lot of check marks for folks, and I know the folks listening, on Zoom and LinkedIn. I mean, I would say more than half of them are probably interested. How do I get into this mining game? Or how can my business benefit in this Helium phenomenon? So where do you see DeWi in 12 to 18 months, or maybe even 2 to 5 years? Where do you see that movement going?
Yeah. So I'm going to throw a little of my LoRaWAN history out there because I've been living and breathing LoRaWAN for about 7 years now. But, the LoRa Alliance was started as a group and conglomerate of companies that believed in the technology, right? And knew that the technology needed to scale and it was going to scale. But in order to scale appropriately, and in order to continue to improve technology roadmaps and deliver the right technology, the LoRa Alliance was created. And what ended up getting created out of that was a very wonderful core foundation with different types of committees focusing on different areas to help educate, drive new technical advancements, and kind of create a governance body to help drive folks towards a common layer of architecture. So DeWi is very much that for the Helium Network and the Helium community. And I envision that as the DeWi scales, and Scott has a lot of work ahead of him, lots of folks he's trying to hire, but it's all for good reason, because the DeWi is going to help build and the folks involved in the DeWi and the companies involved in the DeWi are going to help to really create the future of this ecosystem. And it's going to be a foundational building block for this ecosystem to thrive. So that's kind of where I see the DeWi heading. And
right. Yeah, no, and they certainly will play a role, and we'll dig into a little bit more with Scott in terms of what that looks like a few years from now. So one more question for you, TJ, is now how can we ensure interoperability among devices and networks via LoRaWAN architecture? So we got the architecture question now. What are your thoughts on that? And as well, you've got a lot of devices that are connected to LoRaWAN network. Give us some fun nuggets too.
Yeah. Well, the largest factor for scaling and innovating is bringing in different partners and companies with different expertises and helping to create a larger scale solution and opportunity pipeline. And when you look at LoRaWAN, you've got sensors all manufactured by different manufacturers. You've got gateways manufactured by different manufacturers. And you've got, network server companies and application server companies, and everybody is, going and building some really great technology out of this. And they each have like really great skill sets, right? And like niches that they're really good at. So, part of kind of being this glue and where CalChip Connect sits is, we're able to, if a customer has an application or solution need, and they want their app to perform a certain way and alert them a certain way, and they want to do certain things with that data, but maybe they need an outdoor sensor and they need to combine all these things together. The ability to kind of take the different partners in the ecosystem and bring their expertises together creates a stronger LoRaWAN solution, and therefore creates a stronger ecosystem and opportunity beyond that. So as we look at, kind of the intersection of technologies, LoRaWAN has created the framework of the Helium ecosystem, but as we look towards the future, we're going to be incorporating other protocols as well. And that's where things get really interesting, right? Because every technology protocol and wireless protocol has its like unique niche and unique application. But if we can glue all these things together and deliver, let's say, a smart warehouse solution that can run on drones on 5G connectivity and use temperature sensors running on LoRaWAN and, leveraging LTE to Wi-Fi routers and creating this, network and of connectivity, it's going to drive more opportunity and more data and more intelligence. And it's super exciting to think about. So.
It really is. I think the whole DeWi movement and the Helium movement is really changing the definition of what a carrier is. Carrier used to be, you can count them all on one hand, right? And now it's, the people's network, and whether, whatever technology that you can pop up to be part of that that decentralized network is very interesting. So we're hitting in to the point where we're going to be taking questions from the audience. So please put in the chat, and then we'll do this kind of a round robin question. So I'm going to start with one, and I think I'm sorry if I skipped some of you in terms of like the first impression. So I think everyone has told me their first impression. Scott, did you give us your first time into kind of the Helium, how you got involved?
Yeah, so I have been really a blockchain enthusiast for several years.
Yeah.
I mean, my background was so much on like scaling traditional fintech that once I actually entered the space really through like the DeFi side of the world.
Okay.
But once I found out about him, but again, like it's so much of like, it's hard to talk about this without getting too much into like this real like massive paradigm shift between Web 2 and Web 3. The idea of user-owned infrastructure that really just completely, really flips the story on changing incentives. The idea that value can accrue so much more broadly. So for me, with Helium, not being a wireless expert, but the idea that what the Helium Inc. team did that was absolutely brilliant was it wasn't just the the idea of blockchain creating an economic incentive to deploy wireless networks. It was the consumerization of the product itself and how easy it was to interact with. Having tried to mine on different networks, Helium being so plug and play, and I think that's so much a key to the success of the growth of coverage, is how incredible the design has been, and how simple it is for a lay person to get involved. And once you get there, and I think this is kind of one of the beautiful things about hardware in general, is that I think as humans we still love things that are like tactile and analog. We like to put our hands on things. As much as there's so much of a shift in the software side and the protocol layer, being able to like touch and interact with it, it's almost this gateway drug of, well, once you start mining, well, I don't want to just be providing coverage of the network. I want to use the network. I want to go get, I want a clean air sensor. I want to do things that are like, good for my neighborhood potentially. I want to go get, the trackable dog collar. Now I want to like start playing with sensors. I want to provision my own mapper. So it just becomes this really fantastic slippery slope of going from, this is a really interesting economic model, to, wow, mining is so easy and approachable, to, I want to start playing with more of the hardware now. And the way I ended up coming over was, again, I was working on different products, and a lot of blockchain, as much as it's this worldwide community and so many different people participate, there's really no fair weather fans, by the way, in this industry. I mean, people become completely sucked in, and the migration of talent from traditional industry over to blockchain now has just been absolutely wild. So to me, it was such an obvious thing of when I had the opportunity of coming in over to run the foundation, it was a very quick and easy yes to me. But yeah, my origin story was much more from like the economic models that blockchain creates. Very cool.
Very cool. Yeah. I think, Patrick, to you, it seems like a lot of the folks are on the call here are kind of introduced to Helium and DeWi kind of through your connections, and of course I've always mentioned LoRaWAN being kind of the foundation of all of this. But one of the things that has come up is the supply chain that we're all facing here, and everybody wants your chips. Right, and as many miners, that are in demand, it don't work without your chips. So how is Semtech addressing with the global component shortage?
Yeah. So first of all, don't put all the blame on us, please.
Certainly not.
There are other critical components like secure element. There's the often just the off-the-shelf Raspberry Pis, etc. So, the challenge we really anybody as a fabless semiconductor company has is, not only securing wafers, right? That's just one piece of sort of the process. You try to expand your wafer capacity, but often you might these days you might have to sacrifice wafer allocation for some other parts. It's really, really tricky. Then the second step is, you get these wafers, and then you have to make a decision. Well, do I, given limited test time, right? We outsource everything. We outsource testing. So there are companies that just do testing. So do you test on the wafer level and then mark the die that are defective, or do you blind assemble and basically save yourself a step and some money, but you run the risk of, you know, just ending up with a whole bunch of duds if your yield isn't all too good. Then there's the issue of lead frames. You know, you need to get a supply of packages to encapsulate these die into. So there are multiple steps in this whole process before you actually end up with a fully tested part. But we've put some measures in place to actually increase our capacity, not necessarily through a larger fab output, but some savings in test time. So.
Yeah, no, thank you, and it's certainly not just on your shoulders. You know, I say that, but it's one of the key components of this kind of helium movement,
yes,
right?
No, absolutely.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. I do have a question from Darren here in the audience, and I'll throw this out to the panel if they want to take it. Please help clear up something. In the 900 megahertz North America region, how do you interface gateways to third-party devices, say local semiconductor sensor suppliers that offer LoRaWAN devices?
So
anybody want to take that one?
I can take it. So
go ahead, Patrick. I figured.
So really, the Helium network by default is compatible with LoRaWAN devices that are, again, based on a spec sanctioned by what's called the LoRa Alliance. And there are different versions of this spec. And I believe, TJ, maybe you could help me there, but I think it's 1.0.2 and 1.0.3 the compliant devices. So by default, any device that uses that software stack is compatible to the Helium network.
Great. TJ, did you want to add anything in there?
Yeah, and then, you know, the thing I was gonna add into that is, you know, as you look at third-party devices and connecting them through that, there is a set of special keys that you have to ensure gets loaded into the network and application layers, and there's some development involved there. But as Patrick said, that key protocol and everything that runs on those PHY layers and additional stacks above that are all taken care of under that spec. So,
okay. There was a question here actually on our, I believe our LinkedIn live stream. A question here is: the Helium system actually disincentivizes concentration in an area that would contribute to better redundancy and resilience. Concern for IoT for good example is due to latency and not guaranteed transmission of packets, which are resolved by multiple or multi-transmits. It seems that being used for healthy applications like elderly, fall sensors, or emergency buttons seems risky. So basically, to the question to the panel, this attendee is questioning the reliability or packet reliability of using this network for Helium under Helium. Any thoughts on that?
So I'm going to jump in because I think those were two separate questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. They were two separate. Okay.
Yeah. I think that the first question really raises the topic of how Helium incentivizes the proof of coverage, right? And these gateways talking to each other. And admittedly, presumably, if you have too much coverage or concentration in one area, then you aren't as incentivized to add more into that area. One of the points I raised was it's kind of a self-healing network, right? And I mean, I think, you know, the answer to that, at least from my perspective, is given the fact that LoRa has tremendous coverage, right? There is going to be overlapping coverage, and that's kind of the standard way of providing RF resiliency in the network, right? Is you do have overlapping coverage, right? Whether that's incentivized or not incentivized, valid point. I can't really answer to that because I don't have the exact details on how Helium would treat that setup. The second question was related to
latency.
The latency associated, with LoRa in general, I would say, and its applicability in what one could consider mission critical or very critical applications, right? And, you know, LoRa does have an acknowledged mode. LoRa, however, is also not perfectly lossless, right, in terms of latency, right? So there is a lag certainly in LoRa. However, the medical devices that we're developing really solve that gap of having absolutely no connectivity or no telemetry about a particular person, right? So our view is that, let's say for 99% of the cases, having access to a person's vital information, even if it's delayed, let's even say 5 seconds, and it is a false scenario or arrhythmia or something to that, which our device does detect, is still better than a nurse calling that person or calling that vulnerable individual maybe once every 24 hours, right? So there are other mitigating technical things that we can do that I'd be happy to discuss, one-to-one, online, offline.
Right. So you're a believer in that overlapping coverage will take care of the latency issue.
No, I'm a believer that overlapping coverage, which will add resiliency to the network.
Resilience, excuse me, that's the right word. Resilience. Yes. Okay. And then there actually a comment here related to the tokenomics in a way. Shaheen asks, if it is not outside the scope here, I'd be interested in the consensus algorithm, how the supply of tokens is governed, and whether Helium 5G has anything to do with the Helium LoRaWAN. And if it's outside the scope, we can move on. But any comments to that? Because I think that's going to lead into a question about having other technologies on the Helium network. Anyone care to comment about this?
The algorithm itself is definitely outside of scope. There's a lot of information on Helium's documentation page if you want to get into the nitty-gritty details of the algorithms, etc.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick, for that. Okay, and there's a question for you, Barney. I believe, I don't know if you've addressed that, but I'll go ahead and read it. For Barney, aside from the complexity of regulatory certification, is it possible to create a sensor with Semtech chips that allows a software programming for a region? Example in use is a sensor in use on shipping containers that could detect from its GPS location, example, where ship has docked, then set its jurisdiction before transmitting. And to the panel, but starting off with Barney.
Yeah, so I just realized that neither Patrick nor I should be typing our answers into the
That's okay.
Answer that.
Yes.
So,
good for the others. Yes.
The answer is yes. It is more complex, obviously, but there are people doing that today. Yes.
Yeah. And Patrick, maybe you can elaborate on Semtech's ability to have location software services. I think not too many folks know that there's an element to that Semtech is providing as a service.
Yes, absolutely. So we have a new chip. It's called the LR1110. It's also known as our LoRa Edge platform. It is not only a LoRa transceiver, so not only an RF transceiver, but it has a built-in micro that's not open to the user, but on it we can run what we call an embedded modem. So in essence, you have your whole LoRaWAN stack built into the device. This chip is also capable to do what's called Wi-Fi sniffing. So it can actually, in a very short amount of time, less than 100 milliseconds, it can capture the SSIDs and MAC addresses of nearby public access points. And then it takes those addresses, stuffs them into a LoRaWAN frame, sends it to our LoRa cloud, and then we spit back basically a location, if there is one. And that location is based on, there are public services like Cobain or Skyhook, I think, that offer a location. Then the other option is to do a GNSS scan. So we don't have enough correlators on the chip to calculate longitude and latitude on the chip, but instead we take the timing information from the space vehicles or satellites that we can see in the sky or connect to, and then we send that timing information again to our LoRa cloud, and then it gives you back a location. The idea is that this takes a lot less time than using a regular GPS chip, and as such, you can get a much longer battery life out of a tracker than with a regular GPS chip. The downside is it is not as accurate as the best GPS transceiver out there. So it's a trade-off.
Yeah. Have you given a distance kind of accuracy compared to GPS, or is it the answer is it depends?
It really depends, right? Then you get into these discussions about open sky or you know,
indoor,
well, indoor is out of the question, but there's actually or you know, like if you're in an urban environment with a lot of multipath, but you know, I can't regurgitate any specific numbers off the top of my head because it just varies too much on the use case. But one interesting use case is actually our chip quickly, in a very short amount of time, it can actually tell you if you're indoors or not, while a GPS receiver just is going to sit there for a while and then realize, oh, I guess I'm not indoors. I'm indoors and not outdoors. So
yeah, very cool, very cool. Yeah, so I guess we have another question here. From Scott. I guess this is from Scott to everyone. So I'll go to one of the questions that I've been wanting to address to the panel. We've all heard that Helium plans to announce to add other wireless technologies like Wi-Fi or LTE to kind of its organic network. Where do you see an overlap or a complement to the existing LoRaWAN network, how it's being used out there? So with that, I'll start with TJ. Where do you see that overlap?
Yeah, so when we talk about you know, the value of data, which is part of the reason we're all here today speaking, is because we're connecting things, we're creating a market movement, and we're delivering more data to the ecosystem. And all this comes together and helps create better business efficiencies, better homeowner efficiencies, as an example. So as you look at, you know, when you walk in a home today, you've got some competing, kind of not competing, but technologies. You got a Wi-Fi router in the home. You've got devices connected to your Wi-Fi. You've got cellular devices. You know, you're connecting your headphones over BLE to your phone to listen to your music. So you've got all these different technologies already in you know, the home and in businesses today. But as we look at, you know, like HIP 37 with Omni protocol around Helium, what we can start to do now is bring the value of LoRaWAN as the core for the consensus and proof of coverage. But now we can add Wi-Fi devices, BLE devices, Zigbee devices, and other, you know, technologies together under one umbrella, and start to deliver a larger opportunity package to consumers and businesses and DIYers and to the people. So that's kind of where we see it heading. We see like this, you know, basically this will allow us to bring together these connectivity technologies, deliver it to a single data stream in the cloud to go, you know, improve efficiencies and do really cool things with.
All right. Yeah, so we're just going to wrap up. Scott, what do you feel about with the DeWi Alliance being agnostic, or do you feel that, you know, different strokes for different folks in terms of the different technologies that are being implemented?
As far as different networks, yeah, I think that, you know, look, a lot of our focus is very much in the idea of like, how are we propagating, you know, connectivity globally, regardless of whether, you know, is that Wi-Fi, 5G, LTE, you know, LoRaWAN. Part of the way, and I think, you know, TJ just alluded to this, the idea of like, kind of, we're fans of let the market decide, in the sense that if we see that, you know, coverage is growing and we're seeing, actually, sorry, not so much coverage growing, but if the utility starts to be focused on one network, then that's where a lot of the rewards are being generated. So we don't necessarily have a stake in the game of like, whether we want to see one network succeed or not. It's the fact of if we're improving global connectivity, whether that's closing the digital divide for cellular coverage or enabling, you know, smarter resource management and better asset tracking through LoRa, we kind of want to allow that for the market to decide, both on the supply side, but also a big focus for the foundation heading into 2022 is obviously around adoption and use of the network. So making sure that we can educate on the variety of use cases, where I think one thing that's really exciting about this is how much the, you know, what blockchain does as far as creating this economic incentive, you're getting an incredible agency to local communities. I think that's actually a really, really key piece here. So if you are out in a rural area that is either lacking on cell coverage or you're looking for better agricultural smart sensor solutions, you're going to be able to actually stand up that infrastructure, earn on it, and then benefit at the application layer. And that's where local communities now can decide this and implement it themselves through the entire stack. You're talking about densely populated cities where, again, are you dropping calls? Are you looking for better resources? It kind of, this is where I think that it's really exciting to kind of see where things go and letting the market decide. So as long as we're enabling that the infrastructure is there, it's supported, it's reliable, it's secure, that we're encouraging diverse participation. And I do mean this in the sense of socioeconomically, geographically, we want people involved in this because there's so much social and good that can come from it. So from a network's perspective, we don't necessarily have a horse to bet on so much as just where's there going to be the most good and the most kind of economic output across the board.
I like the way you put that. Barney, what do you think, being a multi-technology company yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think I really like what Scott just said, and I think it just sort of kind of pick up on that from an actual practical example of how to sort of, from a socioeconomic perspective, use these incentives. A lot of people, like right now, we're talking to a number of folks who are looking at rolling out LoRa, but Helium LoRa in rural, less economically, I would say, wealthy regions, with the idea of bringing broadband, right, which isn't, which it is being talked about right now as part of the Helium thing, but really there's considering, well, how do we roll out LoRa in order to help cover the costs of some of the broadband coverage? And I know this was done by, San Jose, right? But now take that model and you apply that to more rural areas or to global regions where you can basically underpin the cost of the actual broadband infrastructure, whether that's wireless or wired, right? Since we're talking multi-technology, it doesn't always have to be wireless, right? With that incentive and with that ability of mining the tokens to basically cover up the costs of the actual implementation, right? So I think this whole thing, it really does change the game across a lot of different things. And like I said, I feel we were late to the game and it's still really emerging extremely fast, right? So it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next 12 months.
Yeah. No, I think you've got a lot of opportunity ahead of you because, I think with the multiple technology, there's a lot to build. I mean, if you looked at the map, the Helium map, it's big, but it's not completely covered like a cell coverage. So we've got a lot of work to do. And finally, to Patrick, I know you would love to sell more LoRaWAN chips, but how do you see LoRa and these other technologies kind of working together in the kind of the Helium DeWi ecosystem?
Well, Helium, the LoRaWAN and 5G are separate, but they find themselves, also, for example, imagine you have a restaurant, right? And you're in an area where there's no 5G yet. So you install one of these 5G Freedom 5 gateways with a small cell radio or a little base station, and you can now earn, you can have some kind of income stream on H&T from people using the 5G network. And at the same time, you can have sensors, LoRaWAN sensors connected to measure, for example, temperature in your coolers and freezers, and have connected rodent traps, etc. And at the same time. Yeah. So they're very complementary.
Yeah, for slow speed IoT and high speed IoT to be complementary. So with that, we're going to close out. Thank you, everyone. We're going to do our final raffle here. So our esteemed chairman, Peter, has already picked a name out of the hat. And I believe the winner of the Helium Asset Tracker is, let me see here. I believe the winner is Mel Sheet. So Mel, if you could please send me directly your email contact. We will be shipping this to you. So congratulations for that, and enjoy the Helium network, and do send us a picture of you using it in your vehicle or asset. So with that, I want to thank you all, and thank you to the panelists. Thank you so much for your time, your precious time, and your wisdom. I think a lot of folks who didn't know about DeWi or Helium or LoRaWAN, I think that they've now have a better appreciation for that. And if they want to get involved, certainly contact you. We'll be putting your contact information on the WCA website if you'd like, and this recording will be available soon after the event. And just as a final reminder, for those who attended, you enjoyed the talk and would like to continue for us to bring more leading edge wireless centric information to the public, please consider a small donation. We are a nonprofit. If you can go to wca.org/support us. So with that, thank you, Patrick, TJ, Barney, Scott, and everyone for attending. And Peter, did you have any closing words? Or?
Yeah, as always, thank you so much for the panel, and also Andy to bring this together. We learned a lot today about LoRa, but also about the possibility what we can do with this kind of decentralized networks. We're starting here back with Napster, which was run down, but now with decentralization, we can do much more, and we will find probably more applications also. Having said this, we will have a follow-up probably next year somewhere with another IoT application event until then, and also until next week, where we have our What's Hot event. Thank you very much again to the audience and to the panel. And Andy, thank you. See you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you both. Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.